Welcome to City of Keene in Focus. Thanks so much for listening. Hello, and welcome to our next episode of City of Keene in Focus. My name is Asa Kramer, and I am joined today by our city manager, Elizabeth Furland, and our fire marshal, and I believe also our building and health official, Rick Wood. Yeah. Hi, you two.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, Asa. Oh, busy week leading up to the holidays.
Yeah, it has been busy.
It has, surprisingly so. Usually it gets pretty quiet around a holiday, but it's been pretty hectic still. So maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rick, for joining us today. We're still going to be spending some time talking about the changes that are being put forward as they were referred back to committee. But I think it's great just to talk about what we're trying to do. We're trying to make things better.
Absolutely. So as you know, we've done two separate things, right? We separated out the construction regulations from the property standards and housing regulations. So those are now in Chapter 44. We actually, in essence, deregulated because we took out a lot of the unique Keene-only things that didn't really provide what we consider to be a high-level value and opted to be streamlined and more consistent with the state building code, which really puts us on a level playing field with our partners around us, makes it easier for contractors to know the rules and to follow them because they're the same everywhere else. In the property and housing standards, we did a couple of things. Some of the items that were previously in there made it a little bit difficult to figure out how to apply those provisions from a uniform practical perspective. One of those is a great example is the idea of unregistered vehicles. So we had in there previously you couldn't have any unregistered or uninspected vehicles on your property. Although that might seem logical, maybe in the downtown area, in a rural area, it's not very logical because there are often plow trucks and things like that that are personal plow trucks, not registered, not inspected. They're only there to plow the long driveway. When we have a regulation, it's got to be applied equally. So we took an opportunity to change that so that you can now have no more than one unregistered vehicle, so kind of splitting the baby a little bit, so to speak, so that we still don't have a situation where we have, a junkyard-esque scenario, but we're recognizing that people do want to work on a vehicle, especially, new drivers oftentimes will buy an older vehicle and want to work on it to get it running, and this allows that to be a smoother process.
I think there's lots of examples where there could be a period of time where you have a car or truck, a vehicle that's not been registered and inspected. So I think this makes a whole lot of sense. It also makes sense for the enforcement individuals as well, because if that's what it says no unregistered vehicles, and we get a complaint, then we're going to need to follow up on that one unregistered vehicle. And sometimes it's a lot of work for not much result.
Yeah, that's a great point. Most people don't recognize the length of time it takes, right? We're government officials, so just because the regulation says you can't doesn't mean we can just have the tow truck come pick it up. We have to follow a process. And we found, frankly, that unregistered vehicle complaints were chewing up huge amounts of time for the inspectional staff and yet really don't, from the neighborhood quality of life and improvement process, don't really pay off the dividend of things like trash, for example. Trash is an example of something that is a constant challenge for us that is important because if people don't put their refuse in the correct place in a closed container, then we have issues with infestation and different types of rodent population potential, right? They become breeding grounds, if you will. And so that is important for us to stay on top of. There was a section that we had proposed that caused some confusion. So at the first presentation we had in front of PLD, there was confusion about yard waste versus refuse. So after looking at that again, we decided to take the yard waste out because it is a different thing and really didn't create the level of risk that we were concerned about.
I remember at PLD there was discussion, does that mean you can't rake your leaves into the woods near your property, because isn't that yard waste? And so really clarifying what the intent is. There were actually several pieces of Chapter 18 where we had language in there that really was gray. It was pretty unclear what the intent was, and so cleaning up some of that language makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I think with any type of code enforcement work, be it housing, property standards, fire, building, it really doesn't matter. That comes just like law enforcement with this need to use discretion and understand what we're trying to achieve. And I think that that's what we try to do here was to focus it down, simplify it a bunch so that people understand what is it we're trying to achieve and that everything is tied to a specific community goal, generally around health and safety. So that's what we aimed for. There was one big add to the housing section, and that was the idea of requiring rental property to have posted the name, contact information for either the property management firm or the owner. That is the one item that is a focal point for further discussion to try to understand and try to come to a reasonable consensus about how to manage that. One of the concerns centers around properties that don't have common space, for example. Our perspective is really that the goal of this is we have a lot of property that we don't know who the owner is other than the tax bill, and oftentimes that's
An LLC.
That's an LLC
Yeah.
and someplace USA, and it becomes very complicated. What we're trying to do is create an environment where the occupants or the tenants have the information to contact their property manager or their owner, because we believe that's the first step, right? They should give their owner an opportunity to solve the problem, and that is part of the way we approach the enforcement. The other reason is because we're finding at 2, 3 in the morning, if our emergency responders show up and we can't contact somebody, that leaves us at a gap. Now we might have rental property with 4 or 5 units. We don't have a lot of options if we don't know if the owner's got somebody coming to fix a problem, for example. There's a need. This is consistent with what other cities here in New Hampshire are doing. It helps us speed up the ability to solve a problem. It's not necessarily, the owner or the landlord's fault. It's just a fact that we have a situation that we just need rectified. It's not a punishment situation. It's really just, hey, if we can get this cleaned up. The faster we get the information about who owns the property, the easier those things are to manage.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think it was Councillor Bosley who had lots of questions about what do we do if we don't have a common space and where do we post? And
They're great questions for us to think about. Some of the things to think about, we don't even recognize it when we walk into a hotel room. Every hotel room has stuff posted on the back of the door,
that's
right?
true.
It's behind a piece of plexiglass. It's permanent. Where to post is one element, but certainly the need to post and having consensus on that is really the starting point, making sure that we're there. I've spoken to many property managers or owners, and some of the concerns are the same concerns we have with providing other infrastructure in the building. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard, I had a smoke detector there and the tenant took it down,
Yeah.
Is a good example. And I'm not sure how we manage around those issues, but those are real issues.
well, I'm excited that we're dealing with this language in Chapter 18. It's been something we've been talking about for, at least a year, maybe more. And
Before I came.
Yeah, so I know that there was a lot of language that really needed to be cleaned up in there, so I'm excited about getting that done. But I'm also excited about the work that you've been doing to just align with the state building code, because it is confusing when people are doing projects, one community, and they have a different expectation and standard than the community right next to them, and it can create a lot of confusion. So I can see how that could be a benefit to people as well.
Imagine if we had a sports team and every time we played the game, we went by a different playbook. And that's essentially what we've asked contractors, architects, and designers to do. I'm really in favor of making sure we minimize that as much as possible. It's an efficiency gain for everybody.
So hopefully at our next PLD, we'll have a new chair, maybe a new vice chair. Those announcements haven't come out yet. The mayor's making those appointments for the new year. But I know Councilor Bosley has said she's going to come back in the audience and participate, which is great. It'll be nice to continue this conversation. And the other thing is, once we get an ordinance adopted, it's never done. There's always more work to be done. We think we get it right, but then when a project comes along and we see another conflict somewhere or something that we didn't intend, we come back again. So these things are really more of living documents.
I think that's a great point. We ebb and flow with what the needs are, and that's what regulation is supposed to be. So we've really prided ourselves on trying to help people figure out different pathways to compliance, because there are many pathways to choose from, and it is complicated. And so it is important that we try to help people up front understand the pathways and let them choose. It's their building after all. It's their money being expended, so they choose the wise route for them.
Yeah. Makes sense. While you're here, I would love to just talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing since you came to the city. Before you arrived, we had fire inspections under the fire department, and we had building inspections and code inspections under the community development department. And at times, it did create some conflict, whether it's conflict with the property owner because they met with one department and thought they were done and then didn't realize they were also going to need to meet with the other, or just conflict in terms of approach and opinions and timelines between the two departments. And I've seen such a huge improvement since you've been here. I've gotten lots of really great feedback about the work that you have done with both fire and code to really streamline the work, but also just make sure that we are strategically looking at the best path to resolve a problem. So because both fire and code are working with you, you have that ability to work with them to pick whichever path might be the best to deal with a property that maybe that has been a challenge for us for a number of years. You may get together, you have code and fire in the room, and they decide code is the easiest path to resolve this issue. And so just kudos to the work that you and the team, I think both the fire inspectors and the community development inspectors and the whole team upstairs have been doing a really great job.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Manager. I don't deserve much of the credit. I just structure things so people can have conversation, right? It's really the team that pulls this off. It's a common understanding of why we're here. Right, and we as a government are here to provide the service to our community. You know, it's a good opportunity. I'm going to roll it out here. We're a few months away from hopefully our kickoff for our new software package for permitting and licensing and construction. And I'm super excited that that's going to be the structural platform to give us this one city approach. As a consumer, you're going to be able to access this platform and basically make three choices. Are you doing something for land use permission? Are you doing something construction? Or are you doing something that is operational? You answer a few questions, and based on the questions you answer, you might answer a few more. If you only are looking for something small, you don't have to fill out 40 different slots of information. It's going to be a great program. We're going to be taking payment online, which is amazing. So if you want a permit, you can apply at 3 o'clock in the morning and pay on some cases where our goal is to try to have some permits that are auto-issued. And we have the ability using conditional logic inside the programming to be able to do that. It's not custom programming per se. It's using a platform that we control. But I'm super excited. I think the citizens are going to be very happy once we're done. And again, like you said, it's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
It'll change. There's even a dashboard that you, the consumer, can look at to see where it is. Who's got it? What's the last step it was complete? So it'll be just like your Domino's delivery or your Amazon account. It'll say pending or shipped or same concept, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. OpenGov is the name of the platform. And that is a great software application that has lots of potential. We've used it in the past in a limited way. It was more tied to finance. You know, now that we're moving in this direction, that's something that we'll need to take a look at in the future is how we might tie in some other parts of government. One of the things that I am really hoping to make some progress on this upcoming year is dashboards. Dashboards are so helpful, not only for the public when they're trying to follow something, but also for management, the departments, the supervisors to understand and just be able to look real quick. You know, it sounds easy to create, but it's not as easy to create. But once you have done it, then you have a wonderful tool. So we can start with OpenGov, with Code and Fire, and see where else we can make some progress.
It's absolutely one of our goals is the report out. The program and the tools that come with it do allow us to visualize. It's got a native tie into our GIS system. There'll be a lot more transparency as far as the ability for people to search projects. We have different levels of ability to screen through. So you could find everything about a building project except the person's phone number and, you know, email address or some of those kind of private information pieces. But yeah, we have a lot more ability for people to access things, have them visualized, including tied back to our GIS system. So we're hopeful that by the end of this coming calendar year, we roll out early March is the plan. We transition off of our other program that we currently use, iWork, no later than the end of June. And then we'll have the opportunity to focus on how do we visualize that data, make sure that it's accessible for people. But it's doable, it's all there, and we're pretty excited.
Yeah, me too. All right, is there anything else you want to cover this
No, I
afternoon?
just want to, wish everybody a safe and happy holiday season.
Thanks, Rick. You too.
Well, great. That was a great discussion with Rick. It sounds like a lot of really exciting changes are on the way, and good, efficient changes.
Yeah. I'm really excited about the progress we've been able to make so far and the work that we're doing right now for the future. Even though it takes us so much time to really get through a project like this, especially when we're changing software or we're changing a process. You might think this is quick and easy, but it is not. There's a lot of work that goes in the background to make it work the way that we want it to. So I'm excited.
That'll be great.
So we had other stuff happen.
We did.
Yeah. Actually, it was a relatively quick meeting because they were anxious to get out for the holiday party. But we still did have a lot of things to talk about. I think probably the thing that's generated the most interest has been the downtown infrastructure project. We knew that December 18th was the day that we'd be opening bids. At 2 o'clock, we opened them. Unfortunately, it just was not good news. We only got 2 bids, and they very much exceeded the amount that we had in the budget. The other part of it is that I talked to the purchasing office Thursday afternoon trying to understand, why didn't we get more bids? And he's not exactly sure because the purchasing office can see if someone has downloaded the documents. And usually if a construction company is downloading the documents, they're getting ready to bid. And we had pages of companies downloading the documents. So usually with that much interest, you would think we would have gotten more than 2 bids. So now the question is, why? Why didn't we get more bids? Was it the time constraints? Was it the timing of the bid? Was it something in the bid? And so, now Public Works and the purchasing office really need to look at the 2 bids that we did receive and see if they can also get some feedback from the people that put in bids and then others that we are surprised they didn't put in a bid, to see why. With that information, they'll be able to make some additional recommendations to MSFI in January.
Now, is the window for, I'm not entirely sure how this works, is the window for bids, is it closed, or is it possible we might get more?
No, so it's closed.
Okay.
There's a bid deadline, and then there's a public opening of the bids, and so it's a very formal process. So, that has already passed, but they could go back out to bid. I mean, they could rebid it in a week. They could rebid it in a month. They could rebid it in the spring. I think a lot is really going to depend on what they determine once they review the bids and gather some more information to figure out why we didn't get more bids. And then they'll make some recommendations to the MSFI committee before they do anything else. So we'll see. The other thing that was kind of odd is of the 2 bids that we did receive, purchasing was looking at their bid quantities. So it's broken down into different quantities of, let's say, gravel that you might need or whatever the category might be. And there were some wildly large differences between the 2 bids in some of the categories. And that, again, usually you could see if one was just trending higher than the other, but they had these differences within the categories, which were rather large.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's peculiar.
It is.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the next step will be, but they will continue to go through those bids and see if they can get some additional information to share with the committee. So the other thing I think that didn't create a lot of conversation because the Pearl Street public hearing had already happened, and that was about a proposed zoning change at the intersection of Pearl Street and Winchester Street. A property owner had brought forward a change to change it from low density to commerce, and that got a lot of feedback from the people who live in that area who are very much opposed to that and concerned about changing the character of their neighborhood. I didn't talk to the petitioner, but he heard them and he wrote a letter to the city clerk's office withdrawing his ordinance request. So even though he had asked for the withdrawal, it still required a vote of the council to accept the withdrawal because we were already in the formal process with the public hearing. And so that was a quick vote of the city council, and that item is now complete. So that will not change. The zoning amendment will not go forward. Other than that, there were just a few things for reporting out for committee. I think some additional fallout related to the downtown project. One of the items was for an engineering contract for the solar pavilion that's proposed for Gilboa Ave. Now, just to be clear, the solar pavilion is 80% funded through a grant. We got a Northern Borders grant. The contract that was being requested by Public Works was for the engineering services for that project, not for the project itself. And so the engineers, we had gotten two. We went through our request for qualifications, Public Works did, and they got two submissions. They selected Stantec. That was before the council, but I think that, you heard from the council Thursday night that they're just I think they're just frustrated. And with the downtown project, we haven't gone through the bids, but they're frustrated with the changes in the cost. And since Stantec has been the engineer to design that project, they just did not feel comfortable awarding another contract to them at this time. So that was a vote of 10 in opposition and 5 in agreement to move it forward. But that does not kill the solar pavilion project. It now allows us to go back to the second company who gave us their RFQ documents and go through with them to see if we can come up with a contract. If we're successful with that, we'll be back to FOP for approval for that contract. Then the other really big approval that we got on Thursday night, which is also very exciting, is the adoption of provisions for RSA 79E, community revitalization. So we have 79E now in the downtown, and over the past year, we've been working with a consultant that we hired through some InvestNH grant dollars to help us come up with a proposal for an expanded 79E district, but also to look at residential projects for 79E. And so Thursday night, the City Council approved that, and the next step will be for us to look at amending our application to include residential and to also create a checklist for the City Council when they're reviewing these applications. And so we'll continue our work with that consultant and bring forward some additional forms just for some feedback, likely to PLD, so that before we start rolling out application and accepting applications for 79E residential.
Great.
Yeah, it's exciting. Just real quick to explain how the tax benefit works is if you qualify, your building has to be of a certain age, the project has to be of a certain dollar value, it has to be a major investment. But what it does is if someone is applying and they're adding a residential unit, so it's helping to build our housing stock, and the council approves it, they can approve up to 5 years in the base. And let's say the project costs someone $50,000 or $100,000, and typically when their permit goes in, that triggers a review of their assessment. And that would then, once the project was done, would potentially increase their overall assessed value and they would pay higher taxes. But going through this program, if you qualify and you're able to sort of freeze the value of your home at the price that it currently is set at, and then not see that increase for how many ever years are deferred. And so up to the 5 years, so say it's 5 years, and in 5 years you would then see your new assessed value, and the city would then collect taxes on that increased assessed value. So it's just another tool. It just defers the increase in the assessed value, which defers the increased tax payments that would be required for projects that meet all of the qualifications. And then I guess just lastly, I will cover, because this is brand new to us, although I know we've talked about it several times, is now we have an ordinance for muzzling of vicious dogs. And this didn't get a ton of feedback at committee. We did just have some supporters come in and talk about the need for it. But the muzzling for a vicious dog is really, there's language in the ordinance that defines what a vicious dog is. And this really was prompted by a woman who had her very small dog attacked, and apparently that dog had a history of attacking other dogs. And now, if that was the case, probably this dog would have been found to be a vicious dog. And the new ordinance allows for the muzzling of up to 2 years for a vicious dog when that dog is out in public. So not on your property or at your house. While we don't see a lot of this type of behavior in the parks or in the trails, it does happen every now and again. You will see dogs that really don't like other dogs. And in fact, my dog doesn't like other dogs. But if they are getting into a situation and they're not kept under control, whether by leash or some other method, you're ultimately responsible for your dog. And so I think that this was meant to be another tool for the animal control officer to be able to use if they do have a problem dog. And I think when she testified, we may have had over the last several years 1 or 2 dogs that were problematic. I think the really interesting part about this whole thing is, when this first came forward, there really wasn't anything the city could do because the state law had preempted us from acting in this category. So, it's just a good reminder that towns and cities can only do what the state has given us authority to do. And this is one of those things we did not have authority to do. We could not require muzzling. And so it was just this whole community effort. We had a member of the House, Jody Newell, put forward a bill. She got people to sign on. The owner of the dog that was attacked testified. They went through the whole process and got the law changed and then brought back this ordinance request. So I guess it's also a good reminder that one person can change the law.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's one of the greatest things about working in local government. It's really local. It's very much hands-on, and that people who live here and work here, they are able to make a change. I may be just a little biased, but I think the further up in government you go, the harder that is. And so it's nice that someone can come in and ask for this to happen and then work with their legislators and make it happen.
I'm really inspired by the community in Keene. It's, in general, a very civically minded, very community-minded city. I think it's a really, really cool example of community spirit.
Yeah, we just saw it with the neighborhood that came out.
That's true.
They came out and they said, no, not in our neighborhood. We want to keep our neighborhood. And the council has always been, since I've been here, very, very responsive. So it's great to see that, you can come in and have your voice heard and make a difference.
I love that.
I think that's it for me, Asa. This is kind of a long one because we started with the zoning, but I think that really covers it for last Thursday's meeting. The next meeting, which is January 1st, which is our inauguration. So everyone who was elected or re-elected is getting sworn in. And it's on January 1st, which is a holiday for the city, but we do hold this meeting. It's usually not a very long meeting. It's a very much a ceremonial meeting. A lot of families come in to see their loved ones get sworn in. Usually there's a State of the City address by the mayor. There's some committee appointments that happen. There'll be some shuffling around of members of the council on the different subcommittees. It's usually like about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but that is required to be held on January 1st. There's no flexibility in that. We're not having it any other day unless the charter is changed, because that is a requirement in the city's charter.
So we will look forward to that at noon on January 1st. A couple of upcoming City Hall closures. We will be closed on December 25th, and then we will mostly be closed on January 1st, but we will reopen on the Fridays following both of those holidays. I'll encourage everyone to go to keenanh.gov/jobs. I hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday season.
Hopefully people get a chance to spend time with their families and friends. All right, that's the best part of this season. I'm very fortunate that I spend a lot of time with my kids all year long. Even though that they're grown up, we get to spend a lot of time together. But I know that for some people, they live far away, and this might be the only time they get to really see them. So I really hope that people have an opportunity to not only enjoy a lot of really good food, but really enjoy time with their family and friends and be safe.
That's wonderful. And I think if that's it, we will wrap up and we will see you next time and have a very, very happy holidays. Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. We'll see you next time.